Morning, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. This is a joint meeting of the AM and PM committee, and as such, the clerk will record those present. And I guess to start off the opening remarks, staff has put together this budget presentation. We're here to hear the highlights of it and have it introduced to us, and it will be discussed in full on March the 7th. So I would, at this time, turn the microphone over to the Treasurer, Mr. Innes, and have him present the 2018 draft budget.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the introduction of the 2018 budget. As in previous years, we're going to start off with a bit of history and context for the budget so that we can put the discussion in terms of what we've noted in the general economy and what has happened in the past year. We know that, unfortunately, in Lambton County, that our population projections continue to be flat. We are not necessarily losing a lot of population, but we're also not gaining, despite our efforts to do otherwise. The economy has remained generally strong, and actually in Lambton County it is increased substantially over the last year, and we are doing quite well in that area. That is confirmed by the fact that our local unemployment rate is now decreasing. We continue to have limited assessment growth in Lambton, but there are no significant write-downs or write-offs of taxes that have been experienced in the past year. With the NOVA announcement that came out last fall, we're hoping to see a change in that going forward, but I don't expect to see that necessarily in 2018. Interest rates are beginning to rise, but again, that is not going to have a significant impact on the county right now because all of our contracts are for term and have guaranteed rates. On a bit of good news, SWIFT has started to let contracts, so it is actually in the process of beginning to build the network that will ultimately see high-speed network brought to Southwest Ontario. OMPF. A lot of people continue to see reductions in the amounts that they are receiving, but if you are no longer in a municipality receiving transitional assistance, there actually have been some minor increases to the amounts of funding that have been provided with that. That being said, it continues to be an irritant for a number of people because the level of funding in the current program is considerably lower than it was under the previous program. We also would note that the provincial government continues to be more interested in urban matters than it is in the rural issues that affect communities like ours. And we also have continued to see few significant or beneficial funding programs that the county can take advantage of, coming from either the provincial or the federal governments. It doesn't mean that there haven't been programs. There was an announcement yesterday, for example, of a new program coming out. But in order to qualify for that, your population could not exceed 5,000. So again, there may be opportunities for area municipalities, but for the county, we are not seeing any additional funding coming through that we are aware of right now. We also, as staff, continue to implement a strict discipline on our program spending because there still is a lot of uncertainty over the way programs are going, what funding is going to happen into the future, and we want to ensure that we're never going to put the county into a position, if we can help it, where they are going to have costs incurred because there was funding from the province before and there's not funding now. Property assessment. This is the second year of the current assessment cycle. The good news is that means that all of the decreases came through last year, so that we're only going to be seeing, for the most part, minor changes in the current year. On a negative side, although we were promised last year that the province was going to do some significant insight and work into assessment-related issues like landfills, nothing has happened. The other critical issue that we have that hasn't percolated into Lambton County, but we are paying attention to right now, is pipelines, because we are finding that in some of our neighboring communities, There are efforts by the companies that operate pipelines for transmitting natural gas and other petroleum products are trying to get those assessments reduced. And if they are successful there, that could have issues in some of our areas, especially to the south. We'd also note that MPAC appointed a new president in December. I make that note because for much of 2017, we didn't hear anything from MPAC. They seem to be inward gazing, if you would, dealing with their internal issues and what they were going to be doing with regards to moving forward with a new leadership in place. With that new leadership now appointed, and I believe that she is scheduled to take over at any time now, we are hoping that we'll begin to see MPAC resume its outreach efforts and that we will see some improvements and some attention being paid to some of the irritants that we have experienced in the past. Your staff at the county and your staff at your municipalities continue to work collaboratively on proactive appeals. We've also brought in new procedures and assistance to help you with the new ARB rules regarding how to deal with appeals. And we continue to work to try and influence MPAC policies and practices to reflect the needs of this community in every opportunity that we have. The weighted assessment change in 2018 is 6.38%. The vast majority of that represents an inflationary increase. The real growth, in other words, assessment that was not here in 2017, but is here in 2018, so that money being raised from that does not translate to a tax increase for the other properties in the county, is worth almost $600,000 this year. Last year was slightly more than $600,000. Tax policy. We've had three events that happened in the last year that have impacted on tax policy that we need to be aware of. The first was that the province gave municipalities the legislative opportunity to customize how we deal with vacancy rebates. And again, I have been circulating information to each of your municipalities to get some input back from that, as well as talking with the local chambers of commerce. The second is the fact that we now have an opportunity to end capping. And although we don't know for sure at this point in time, I'm hoping that in my report that will be coming to you next month, it's going to indicate that we now finally are at the point where we can formally say goodbye to capping and move on to a standardized regime where everybody's taxes in the three commercial, industrial, and multi-residential classes are paying tax on the same basis. However, in the multi-residential class, we also have to deal with the fact that the province in last year decided that any ratio in excess of 2, and our ratio is slightly less than 2.4, would be subject to a hard cap. In other words, any levy increase could not be passed through to that group. Again, we've had to look at that. We decided that it was easier just simply to absorb the increase last year. We will be reporting back to you this year as to what the impacts are going to be in 2018 and what our recommendations are. The third part behind it was the fact that we were asked to involve local councillors, all local councillors, in the process of reviewing tax policy. And we've done that by, first of all, circulating a report last year to everybody to show what was brought to council in 2017. And we will now be circulating in next week a 2018 report that hopefully can be looked at prior to March 7th. I apologize for the short notice on this one, but it's been necessary, the timing was a result of the availability of the information necessary to build the report. Regardless, we will be circulating that out before March 7th so that all of your area municipal councillors will have had an opportunity to look at the report before it is considered in this chamber. Debt level, something that has been an issue and that we've talked about over the past several years. Our debt level at the end of 2017 reduced slightly. We continue to have a projected capacity of our debt level that is well below the 30% mark. Again, Council has for years indicated that the benchmark is 30%. If we're below 30%, we believe that we're doing a reasonable job. We try never to go over that. The budget that I'm presenting today contemplates slightly less than $2 million in debt. That is going to fund 6 TCA projects, 1 project in our project and purchasing facilities department, and another 5 bridge projects in public works. We are not going to be suggesting that we finance any road work through this project as we did a couple of years back. We also will have $184,000 being drawn down from the IT revolving credit. And that is so that we can continue to refresh our computers and make sure that machines that are not being effective and cannot deal with current software are being replaced and we have the proper equipment in place for going forward. It's important to note that by all measures, either our credit rater, our bond rating company, or from the province, the County of Lambton is deemed to be a low borrower. In other words, our borrowing rate is substantially low compared to other comparable municipalities, and that is one reason why we have earned a AA- stable rating from our bond rater. Key components to the budget. We have a number of costs that have gone through. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail because you will have a copy of it in the front of your binder. You will also be able to, there's another document I'll refer to later that deals with this as well. The key here is we have got costs for Bill 148. You also note that I have a 0 under change to council grants. In other words, this year we do not have any multi-year programmed grant contributions that are coming to an end. We are in the middle of several commitments that are multi-year. Therefore, there has been no room vacated from what we had in 2017. We also make other minor changes for things like the change in grants and provisions for tax write-offs. The key here is that when we started the budget, your senior staff and your departmental managers were facing an increase of close to slightly more than $4.4 million in additional costs. Now, that doesn't mean that there were not offset revenues to that. We also were able to identify, prior to starting the budget, about $831,000 worth of new revenues that were coming in 2018 that we did not have in 2017. The net result was the fact that we were still facing $3.5 million worth of additional costs that we had to come up with some means of financing when we built the budget. In addition to that, Council has given staff a standing directive that we will build the budget with the 3 contributions to reserves that are identified here. The 1% split between operating and capital has been in existence for approximately 30 years. The 2% of the opportunities and contingencies was introduced about 15 years ago for the purposes of helping us build reserves and also making sure that we have monies available to be able to address any unexpected opportunities or contingencies that happen throughout a budget period. And the third one is the programmed increase in funding towards the replacement of tangible capital assets. There are other influences on the budget we should talk about as well. You have a budget's impact report in the front of the binder. It goes through these issues in far more detail than I'm doing here, and I would ask that you all take the time to read that. I think you will find it informative. In addition to that document, you will also find in the binder the CAO's annual attrition management report. So those are 2 documents in the front along with a copy of the PowerPoint that you can refer to help you refresh your memories as to what we're talking about today. In 2017, we had approximately 64.37% of the county's budget was funded from non-tax or non-levy sources. In 2018, that has increased slightly to 67.16%. That reverses a trend that we've noted in the last couple of years. We're not sure whether that'll continue into beyond 2018, but it is nice to see that in 2018, at least, the ratio between programs that are jointly funded by senior levels of government and the county has shifted so that the senior levels of government are paying more. Another statistic that you should be aware of And this is in a report that is going to Committee PMs at 1 o'clock this afternoon, is the county ended 2017 with a small, and I realize that the dollars involved here are large, but in terms of the county's budget, a small surplus of $750,000. We've also continued to work on replacing our TCAs and to utilize the funding in order to maximize the ability to do that. Nonetheless, we continue to still have a significant backlog in our TCAs if anything, we are stemming the flow, but we're not making a whole lot of headway in reducing that deficit. On March 7th, you will receive a report that will update and provide you the information as to how the activities in 2017 have impacted that deficit going forward so that you can be up to date as to what's happening there. The other point that we're having to deal with is the fact that there continues to be changes in the way that the province funds cost-shared programs. And we also are in a position where the province is, unfortunately, seems to be taking more and more time each year to sign the individual funding contracts that impact on our programs. Although some of those programs are signed in the spring, we actually last year had a couple of programs that the contracts were not signed until the end of November. So we are going for virtually the entire year without being able to confirm precisely what we're going to get from the province. Makes it extremely difficult for budgeting, and we do base our budgets on our best estimate as to what we believe is going to go forward, but we also always want you to make sure that you are aware of the fact that some of these funding envelopes cannot be guaranteed until after the fact. This next slide, department budget overviews. This is in your folder. This is simply a guide for you to understand what each portion of the budget overview document says. When you look at the binder itself, you will see that this is what describes how the dollars are being spent in detail in each budget or each department. And so this is to help you make sure that you understand what each point is and bullet point is trying to tell you. Our cash requirements overview, getting into the meat and potatoes now. In 2018, we are looking at an increase in expenditures of 4.44%, and we are looking at a projected increase, gross increase in funding from the tax base required to pay that of 3.25%. Now, the fact that's the gross number doesn't mean that that's actually the net amount that we're going to pay. It's because we have that real growth of slightly less than $600,000 that is available, which means that the net increase in additional funding that we're looking for this year is 1.7 million plus. And again, you'll recall that when we started the budget, we were looking at an increase of 3.5. So have we been able to basically cut that in half through other measures and mitigation strategies in the budget. Regardless, the net impact on the budget this year is 2.43% increase net. The 2.43% compares to 2.39% that we presented to you last year. I would also let you know that the rate of inflation is currently trending at 1.9%. When we finalized the budget document before you, it was sitting at 2.1%. So again, we always use that as a rough guideline, and we wanted you to be aware of the fact that these were the underlying numbers that we deal with. Total inflation over the past 11 years has been close to 20%. And what this means is that if you look at every dollar that we raised in 2006, in 2017, we raised $1.16. So that's net after allowing for the impact of inflation. That really isn't a significant difference when you compare the difference in the level of service and the number of services that we can have to provide now that we didn't provide in those days. We currently project the tax rates in 2018, based on the document before you right now as it sits, will drop 1.3% from last year. That means in cumulative that we're down 12.41% again from this 2006. And an interesting statistic that I thought that I would share with you. If in 2017 we had used the tax rates that were in effect at the county here at the upper level in 2006, we would have raised in excess of $9 million more than we did. So in other words, when we look at the budget, people think that, we're always just trying to get more money and make it easier than we can. What this shows you is the fact that, no, we ask for the dollars that are necessary to operate the programs. We do not take dollars simply because there's room, if you would, in the budget. And the fact that there could have been $9 million more shows you that staff continue to be diligent, and we appreciate council's support in that regard. We've also used the maximum federal gas and OSIF funding that is available, and I would remind everybody that council grants and referred to budget are not currently reflected in the numbers that we have. Council grants, we reiterate the fact that we've had a formal policy since 2008. We reaffirmed and updated it in 2011. We have a number of legacy grants. Legacy grants means these are grants that do not meet the current criteria, but council has elected to continue to provide. All applicants for grants are advised of our policy, and new applicants have to advise staff in writing as to whether or not, we always advise new applicants as to whether their applications are compliant with our policies, and then they have the option of either coming to you to, if you would, make an appeal for funding regardless. And again, at your meeting earlier this month, you had an organization that came and fully understood the fact that they did not meet the requirement for the grants, but still felt that they wanted to make an appeal to you. We also, at that meeting, had a presentation from the Strathroy Middlesex Hospital Foundation. And we are aware that there's a notice of motion that is going to be brought forward for council to consider to have staff prepare a report to update and augment the existing policy to address the concept of funding such organizations going forward. The idea being to try and make sure that we have a specific set of rules, and then it makes it easier for everybody to know what they can and cannot do.
Councillor Bradley?
If it's acceptable, because the CAO said this motion I served, but it hasn't. Today's probably the best day to move this forward. If I could move that now, if that's practical.
That would be in order to move that notice of motion. That
I want to say I'm pleased that you've expanded it, because originally it was geared at hospitals, but you've expanded it to cover other public bodies. I think that's a very good decision.
So you'd like that report at the March 7th meeting available for us?
Is that feasible, Mr. Innes? You said you've been working on this for some time.
If council's direction is to provide a report at March 7th, I will provide the report.
Okay, so that is a motion that we ask this notice of motion be brought forth and that a report be prepared for our March 7th meeting. Councillor Broad, have you seconding that motion? Any questions? All in favor of that? Opposed? That's carried. We will let the Treasurer continue on. That will give us something to work with.
So looking at 2018, what is happening with council grants this year? We have gotten 7 requests. 5 of those requests are consistent with council's criteria. One of them may be, and again, that depends on whether or not you believe that the grant request from the Crime Stoppers is a continuation of a previously grandfathered grant or it's a new request. Again, that's a decision that I leave up to council to debate on the 7th, but that's why I'm saying one may be consistent, and then there is one that is definitely not. The total value of these asks is $1.5 million, and if you were to fund the maximum amount of each of these grants, the full amount that was being asked, and you were going to pay Strathroy Middlesex Hospital Foundation over 5 years, the impact of doing so on the 2018 budget would be $348,000. Again, that is the maximum amount that of exposure, assuming these parameters that are here. This is just simply illustrative for council's purposes to put that into context. That cost is not in the budget right now, so you would increase the funding from the tax base, or you would have to come up with an alternative to fund that if you wish to see those payments being made. We also have one item that was referred to budget this year. That is the Multi-Use Convention Center. Again, there was a request to investigate that, and there was a report that suggested that we should retain a consultant to do a study. We have estimated the upside cost of that study could be $50,000. And if you wish to do that, again, you would have to vote to add that into the budget going forward. Again, that is consistent with the directions that have been given to us in the past about matters being referred to budget.
Councillor Bradley.
Not from the levy or the Widows and Opportunities Fund, whatever that thing you have, John? That wouldn't be a levy impact, would it?
That would be.
If there is no funding from either the tax base or from any of the reserves or pools available in the budget right now for that one. So if you wanted to do this and you could vote to have it come from levy, you could vote to have it come from the Opportunities and Contingencies Reserve. Again, that's a discussion that you will have on, that is scheduled to happen on March 7th. As far as the budget meeting itself is concerned, the first thing I would note is that it starts at 9 a.m. on the 7th. We do have a second day scheduled in case that is required. That is March 22nd. And again, the reason for the delay is that when we moved to the 7th, we made sure that we avoided any conflict with March break. So we have a number of reports that are coming forward. In addition to the report on the grant policy that was just asked for, we have the impact of funding amortization expense. We're going to have an update on the asset management plan, and you will be receiving a report on tax policy as well. So those are all documents that you were asked to have presented to you prior to considering the budget. So you will receive those documents. You will then go through, and the first item to deal with after that will be council grants, and then the matter referred to budget, and then we will proceed through to the review of the individual departmental budgets. Again, the point will be it'll be done on an exception basis, so that if you like what you see, there is no need to say anything. We just move on, so that if, as we had last year, that the budget is satisfactory to everybody as presented, all we need is one motion to deal with that. If you want to make changes, then you would make a motion at that point in time, and we will record them accordingly. We will have the budget software so we can show the impact of just changes or potential changes on the screen as you're going forward to deal with that. And we'll have the budget or the bylaws available as well in order to ensure that you can finish the process if you believe that your debate has been completed satisfactorily on the 7th. Other key dates to let you know about in 2018. You do have a regular council meeting scheduled for April 4th. At that meeting, you will have the minutes and the recommendations from your standing committees being held today coming forward to full council for review and ratification. In May, we will present our first quarter variance report. In July, we will be dealing with capping, maybe for the last time, but we'll wait and see. August, we'll give you the second quarter update. And then September the 5th, at the very least, we're going to start talking or working on the budget. We may have another bylaw required. We will see. And then, of course, at the end of November, we will again give you the third quarter update. And the fourth quarter will come forward about this time in 2019. So in summary, we have $600,000, round numbers, available in new revenues available in 2018 that do not impact on existing taxation levels. The net additional funding required to fund the budget this year is 1.766694. Rate of inflation is currently 1.9. The draft budget includes 67.16% of non-tax revenues, so that's revenues from other sources other than levy. Tax rates in the draft budget are 12.41% lower than they were in 2006. If we were using those tax rates from 2006 last year, we would have raised an additional $9 million. The amount that would be raised this year depends on what the final decision would be, but it would be roughly the same. Contributions to reserves and program funding has been maintained, and we've kept all existing service and levels at where they were before. We have a question.
Councillor Gillis.
Thank you, Warden Weaver and members of County Council. The $348,000, I think that was the number of the grants, if we approve all of that, is that approximately another 0.5% onto the levy, or that money doesn't necessarily have to go to the levy, it could come from other sources?
So the short answer is yes, it's approximately 0.5% on the levy. Does it have to go directly to the levy? No. You as council have various tools and other sources like the Opportunities and Contingency Reserve available to you to fund if you wished. That would be a discussion that you would have on the 7th. But in the absence of identifying another source of revenue, we would be looking to raise the current increase from 2.43 to slightly less than 3%.
Councillor Marriott.
Thank you, Warden Weaver. Through you to Mr. Ennis. Would it be possible to have another page in the budget this year? Last year, when the budget was passed with a 2.39, I believe it was, when that 2.39 drifted down to Enniskillen, that was a 9% increase. And our cuts in OMPF already instantly mean an 8% increase, and then the county levy, instead of 2.4, ends up being 9%. And I think it would present a more representative figure of how the county levy affects lower tiers, because the 2.39 is an average across the county. It skews. And I think you recognized last year when I brought this to your attention that there was nothing in the budget that shows what that trickle down means on averages.
Yes, the 2.35% that we talked about last year was simply the change in the tax rate. Obviously, the impact on an individual jurisdiction is going to depend on what happens with the assessment. In Enniskillen in 2017, with the reassessment that happened at the end of 2016, the values of properties in the municipality increased substantially more than the surrounding proper jurisdictions, and quite frankly more so than on average the other area municipalities in Lambton as well. So in the case of Enniskillen last year, we had a shift of value so that the assessment went up considerably, and that did skew the value that was there. Yeah, we do show that in the final document. We have not historically shown that in the draft document, but what I will do is that I will produce or have that same schedule produced again that for to be available on the 7th, so that you can have that in front of you. But again, I want to make it very clear. The impact of the decisions made in this council were 2.39% or 3.5% last year. The other impact on Enniskillen was because of the shift in assessment, and we cannot do anything about that. And again, there was, when we looked at that, we were unclear as to why that had happened, because it was the values or the change, especially in the farmland in Enniskillen last year, were substantially greater than anywhere else in the county. So I'm not sure why that happened, but that's what happened last year. I'm not anticipating we'll see the same thing this year, but I'll produce the schedule so you can see.
Yeah, follow up to that is I believe that the 4-year staggered increase will be the same for 18 as it was for 17. And as far as, I mean, you do refer back to if you use 2006 tax rate. Well, the tax rate and the assessment are a continually moving pair that work in tandem to give us our tax bill. So I don't think it's fair to refer back to the 2006 tax rates and then say, well, the assessment changes on farmland have skewed a particular jurisdiction. Like it's kind of like having your cake and eating it too. It's comparing.
My comment on the 2006 tax rates was designed to illustrate the fact that we were not, for those of us who've been in municipalities for an extended period of time, there was a time, especially under the old tax rate scheme, where you would just use the same tax rate as the year before, and you would say, we didn't touch taxes, and if your taxes have gone up, that's an assessment issue, don't talk to us about it. We have tried to be proactive and recognize the fact that when an assessment changes as a result of inflation, that we should not be taking advantage of that if there is no need to do so. So that was the main reason for putting that slide that is there. Yes, it is a teeter-totter. It is back and forth. We do have to be aware of what happens with assessment as well. When we look at what happened, you're always going to have unequal shifts in assessment between municipalities, because no two municipalities are going to be exactly the same. I mean, heavens, I think we've all had a conversation at one point in time with a property owner whose value has increased significantly compared to another, and they don't understand why until you start looking into it and you find out, well, they installed a pool or they finished their basement or whatever. These things happen all the time. But the key behind it is the fact that we do try and bear that in mind. We cannot, at the county level, influence the change in the assessment values that impact individual jurisdictions. I did an analysis last year after looking at the impact on Enniskillen, and in order to reduce the impact on Enniskillen down to closer to the 2.35% mark, we would have left considerable dollars on the table, plus we actually would have ended up having the amount of taxes levied from other area municipalities go down significantly. So again, yes, it's unfortunate. I will bring forward the schedule so that you can see it. That is there. I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of the fact that we still cannot control the differences in the way assessment impacts the individual municipalities. We do try and bear that in mind and make sure that everybody is aware of it. But again, that is what the impact does. They provide us those values, and we do try and question them onto it. I spend an awful lot of time with MPAC and with our assessment consultants trying to ensure that if something is strange, that it's corrected. Again, what I was told when I investigated in Enniskillen last year was the fact that they felt that the values were now reflecting what they should have been, and that if anything, the value of the farmlands in the previous assessment cycle had been undervalued, and they should have been more. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I simply deal with the information that they give me. But yes, I will provide the schedule for you so you can see what the impact of assessment times the change in rate potentially could be. But again, when we do that one, just be aware of the fact that there's limited flexibility as to what we're dealing with. That, if you've had a substantial increase in assessment, even if we're talking about the tax rates are going down 1.3% this year. So we could reduce the tax rates even further, and we would still end up with some municipalities getting an increase in the amount of county level that they are paying. So We will do the best that we can, but we're limited as to the flexibility we have to deal with that.
Councillor Bradley, I believe you had...
Perennial question. That stranded debt that's out there on uncollected fines, and the province was supposed to give us all these tools to collect those, it's a substantial number. Has that moved forward much beyond promises, or is it a reality you can collect all that money now?
There's been limited progress on the ability to increase what we can collect on defaulted, unpaid POA fines. The biggest change that we had last year was that they actually formalized what had been an informal approach before as to how far we could go back for civil enforcement, which is filing writs and other documents to try and seize assets so that we can recover the funds from individuals who have defaulted. The biggest challenge that we have is that there continues to be a prohibition on tax rolling unless the property is actually in the name of the defendant alone. So although that has proven to be a very effective tool where we can use it, our ability to use it is still probably far less than 1% of the outstanding fines that we have. We continue to work with the province and ask for increased abilities to have there be consequences to not paying, I think is the best way to put it. You know, to be perfectly blunt, on a large number of matters that come before the POA court at this time, there is limited consequences to not paying it. And we want to try and make sure that those consequences are increased, you know, so that, you know, if somebody has broken the rules of this province, then they should pay for the consequences of that one and not be able to go. There hasn't been a big change onto it. We continue to work on it. Court staff continue to fight hard with regards to that. When we're talking about courts, one of the bigger changes that we may be seeing this year is that the province is also wanting to talk to us about assuming Part 3 prosecutions as well. And that could have some interesting implications for us as well. It might actually... We don't know whether it would improve the bottom line at this point in time or make it worse. We don't know. But there are changes that are happening. I'm not anticipating that we're going to see any substantial movement on anything until after June. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Was there any other? Councillor McGugan, sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Ward, members of the County Council, thank you for your comments and your presentation. Go back to the grants. Just for clarification, you indicated it was $1.5 million that's been asked for that's not in this proposed budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, then you also said that the Strathroy Middlesex Foundation was so much money over 5 years. I believe they asked for $100,000 over 10 years, would make it $1 million. Is that correct? So you had at 5 years at $345,000 or something.
What I did was they asked for slightly more than $1 million. I costed it out on the basis of making that payment over 5 years at this point in time, so roughly the $200,000 mark. So that's, or actually, sorry, I think it's, no, I'm beginning to wonder what my number was at this point. Anyways, it was a programmed payment over a period of time. They'd asked for, I think it was slightly more than $100,000 a year. So, and so that's where that figure was coming from. So actually, when I'm thinking of it, it was probably should have been 10 years in the slide now. So regardless, the key behind it is there's two things to bear in mind. One is that when you're looking at that, you'll have to decide, do you want to provide the full support that what they were asking for? When they came to council in 2000 with a similar request, the response was to pay them roughly, I think it was $100,000. So it was a very small portion of it, and that was the only payment that was made. Again, the landscape was a little bit different in those days, shall we say, so there seems to be more of a feeling that potentially support should be provided this year. But you can do that over a period of time. You could do one payment. You could do a series of payments. The key behind it is the request has been made of you, and then you as council get to decide how much you believe should be paid.
Okay. Thank you. I want to thank staff for their budget presentation. I know there's all the department heads, a lot of time and effort goes into preparing this. I think it's a great starting point, existing or maintaining our service levels, and I would, if we need a motion to refer this to the March 7th budget meeting, I've got a whole bunch of handfuls over there. Councillor Bruzowicz, seconded by Councillor Broad. All in favor of that? That is carried, and we need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Marriott, seconded by Councillor Napper. All in favor of that? That's carried. Lunch is in the back room here, and we have a committee meeting starting at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.